Okay, we are live again today just to keep on reading our short story from H.P. Lovecraft, Herbert West, Reanimator. This is a short story that we have been reading for quite a while now, and with me is Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for being here. We have been reading all of the chapters at the moment. I mean, today is going to be the last chapter that we're going to read. This is the sixth chapter. This is the sixth chapter. Is The name of the chapter is the Tomb Legions. So we are going to start now. I hope that everyone that will be watching this live stream will be able to I don't know, be able to read the short story with us, or else I think I already add the link to this short story. I'm going to also share the screen to be able to read the story. Okay. So please, Nicholas, you
All
can
right,
start.
great. When Dr. Herbert West disappeared a year ago, the Boston police questioned me closely. They suspected that I was holding something back and perhaps suspected graver things. But I could not tell them the truth because they would not have believed it. They knew, indeed, that West had been connected with activities beyond the credence of ordinary men, for his hideous experiments in the reanimation of dead bodies had long been too extensive to admit of perfect secrecy. But the final soul-shattering catastrophe held elements of demoniac fantasy which made even me doubt the reality of what I saw.
I was West's closest friend and only confidential assistant. We had met years before, in medical school, and from the first, I had shared his terrible researches. He had slowly tried to perfect a solution which, injected into the veins of the newly deceased, would restore life, a labor demanding an abundance of fresh corpse and therefore involving the most unnatural actions. Still, more shocking were the products of some of the experiments, grisly masses of flesh that had been dead, but that West waked to a blind, brainless, nauseous animation. These were the usual results, for in order to reawaken the mind, it was necessary to have specimens so absolutely fresh that no decay could possibly affect the delicate brain cells.
This need for very fresh corpses had been West's moral undoing. They were hard to get, and one awful day he had secured his specimen while it was still alive and vigorous. A struggle, a needle, and a powerful alkaloid had transformed it to a very fresh corpse, and the experiment had succeeded for a brief and memorable moment. But West had emerged with a soul calloused and seared, and a hardened eye which sometimes glanced with a kind of hideous and calculating appraisal at men of especially sensitive brain and especially vigorous physique. Toward the last, I became acutely afraid of West, for he began to look at me that way. People did not seem to notice his glances, but they noticed my fear, and after his disappearance, used that as a basis for some absurd specific. Sorry, excuse me. Let me try that again. And after his disappearance, used that as a basis for some absurd suspicions.
West, in reality, was more afraid than I. From his abominable pursuits entitled a life of furtiveness and dread of every shadow. Partly it was the police he feared, but sometimes his nervousness was deeper and more nebulous, touching of certain indescribable things into which he had injected a morbid life, and from which he had not seen that life depart. He usually finished his experiments with a revolver, but a few times he had not been quick enough. There was a first specimen of whose grave marks of clawing were later seen. There was also the Arkham Professor body, which had done cannibal things before it had been captured and thrust unidentified into a madhouse cell at Sefton, where it beat the walls for 16 years. Most of the other possibly surviving results were things less easy to speak of, for in later years, West's scientific zeal had degenerated to an unhealthy and fantastic mania, and he had spent his chief skill in vitalizing not entire human bodies but isolated part of bodies, or parts joined to organic matter other than human. It had become fiendishly disgusting by the time he disappeared. Many of the experiments could not even be hinted at in print. The Great War, through which both of us served as surgeons, had intensified this side of West.
In saying that West's fear of his specimens was nebulous, I have in mind particularly its complex nature. Part of it came merely from knowing of the existence of such nameless monsters, while another part arose from apprehension of the bodily harm they might under certain circumstances do him. Their disappearance added horror to the situation. Of them all, West knew the whereabouts of only one, the pitiful asylum thing. Then there was the more subtle fear, a very fantastic sensation resulting from a curious experiment in the Canadian Army in 1915. West, in the midst of severe battle, had reanimated Major Sir Eric Moreland Clayton Lee, DSO, a fellow physician who knew about his experiments and could have duplicated them. The head had been removed so that the possibilities of quasi-intelligent life in the trunk might be investigated. Just as the building was wiped out by a German shell, there had been a success. The trunk had moved intelligently, and, unbelievable to relate, we were both sickeningly sure that articulate sounds had come from the detached head as it lay in a shadowy corner in the laboratory. The shell had been merciful, in a way, but West could never feel as certain as he wished that we too were the only survivors. We used to make shuddering conjectures about the possible actions of a headless physician with the power of reanimating the dead.
West's last quarters were in a venerable house of much elegance, overlooking one of the oldest burying grounds in Boston. He had chosen the place for purely symbolic and fantastically aesthetic reasons, since most of the interments were in the colonial period and therefore of little use to a scientist seeking very fresh bodies. The laboratory was in a sub-cellar secretly constructed by important workmen, and contained a huge incinerator from the quiet and complete disposal of such bodies, or fragments and synthetic mockeries of bodies, as might remain from the morbid experiments and unhallowed amusements of the owner. During an excavation of this cellar, the workmen had struck some exceedingly ancient masonry, undoubtedly connected with the old burying ground, yet far too deep to correspond with any known sepulchre therein. After a number of calculations, West decided that it represented some secret chamber beneath the tomb of the Averils, where the last interment had been made one in 1768. I was with him when he studied the nutritious, dripping walls laid bare by the spades and mattocks of the men, and was prepared from the gruesome thrill which will attempt the uncovering of centred grave secrets. But for the first time West's new timidity conquered his natural curiosity, and he betrayed his degenerating fibre by ordering the masonry left intact and plastered over. Thus it remained till that final hellish night, part of the walls of the secret laboratory. I speak of West's decadence, but must add that it was a purely mental and intangible thing. Outwardly, he was the same to the last, calm, cold, slight, and yellow-haired, with spectacled blue eyes and a general aspect of youth which years and fears seemed never to change. He seemed calm even when he thought of that clawed grave and looked over his shoulder, even when he thought of the carnivorous thing that gnawed and pawned at Sefton bars.
The end of Herbert West began one evening in our joint study when he was dividing his curious glance between the newspaper and me. A strange headline item had struck at him from the crumpled pages, and a nameless titan claw had seemed to reach down through 16 years. Something fearsome and incredible had happened at Sefton Asylum 50 miles away, stunning the neighborhood and baffling the police. In the small hours of the morning, a body of silent men had entered the grounds, and their leader had aroused the attendants. He was a menacing military figure who talked without moving his lips and whose voice seemed almost ventriloquially connected to an immense black case he carried. His expressionless face was handsome to the point of radiant beauty, but it shocked the superintendent when the hall light fell on it, for it was a wax face with eyes of painted glass. Some nameless accident had befallen this man. A larger man guided his steps, a repellent hulk whose bluish face seemed half eaten away by some unknown malady. The speaker had asked for the custody of the cannibal monster committed from Arkham 16 years before, and upon being refused, gave a signal which precipitated a shocking riot. The fiends had beaten, trampled, and bitten every attendant who did not flee, killing 4 and finally succeeding in the liberation of the monster. Those victims who could recall the event without hysteria swore that the creatures had acted less like men than like unthinkable automata, guided by the wax-faced leader. By the time help could be summoned, every trace of the men and of their mad charge had vanished.
From the hour of reading this item until midnight, West sat almost paralyzed. At midnight, the doorbell rang, startling him fearfully. All the servants were asleep in the attic, so I answered the bell. As I have told the police, there was no wagon in the street, but only a group of strange-looking figures bearing a large square box, which they deposited in a hallway after one of them had grunted in a highly unnatural voice, "Express prepaid." They filed out of the house with a jerky treat, and as I watched them go, I had an odd idea that they were turning toward the ancient cemetery on which the back of the house abutted. When I slammed the door after them, West came downstairs and looked at the box. It was about 2 feet square and bore West's correct name and present address. It also bore the inscription, "From Eric Morland, Clapham Lee, St. Louis, Flanders." 6 years before, in Flanders, a shelled hospital had fallen upon the headless, reanimated trunk of Dr. Clapham Lee, and upon the detached head, which, perhaps, had uttered articulate sounds.
West was not even excited now. His condition was more ghastly. Quickly, he said, "It's the finish, but let's incinerate this." We carried the thing down to the laboratory, listening. I do not remember many particulars. You can imagine my state of mind, but it is a vicious lie to say it was Herbert West's body which I put into the incinerator. We both inserted the whole unopened wooden box, closed the door, and started the electricity. Nor did any sound come from the box, after all.
It was West who first noticed the falling plaster on that part of the wall where the ancient tomb masonry had been covered up. I was going to run, but he stopped me. Then I saw a small black aperture, felt a ghoulish wing of eyes, and smelt the charnel bowels of the putrescent earth. There was no sound, but just then the electric lights went out, and I saw outlined against some phosphorescence of the nether world, a horde of silent toiling things which only insanity, or worse, could create. Their outlines were human, semi-human, fractionally human, and not human at all. The horde was grotesquely heterogeneous. They were removing the stones quietly, one by one, from the centered wall, and then, as the breach became large enough, they came out into the laboratory in single file, led by a stalking thing with a beautiful head made of wax, a sort of mad-eye monstrosity behind the leader seized on Herbert West. West did not resist or utter a sound. Then they all sprang at him and tore him to pieces before my eyes, bearing the fragments away into that subterranean vault of fabulous abominations. West's head was carried off by the wax-headed leader, who wore a Canadian officer's uniform. As it disappeared, I saw the blue eyes behind the spectacles were hideously blasting with their first touch of frankly visible emotion.
Servants found me unconscious in the morning. West was gone. The incinerator contained only unidentifiable ashes. Detectives have questioned me, but what can I say? The Sefton tragedy they will not connect with West. Not that, nor the men with the box whose existence they deny. I told them of the vault, and they pointed to the unbroken plaster wall and laughed. So I told them no more. They imply that I'm a madman or a murderer. Probably I am mad. But I might not be mad if those accursed tomb legions had not been so silent.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great ending.
It was a great ending. It was a great ending. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest.
I love that we get that first glimpse of Herbert West suffering as he's going to get dragged into that.
I think he knew that he was going to. I think he knew it was his ending. That's why he said it's the finish.
Yeah, he seemed to know that
it was the end.
Yeah, that he had this antagonist going against him.
And it's quite funny, and I'm going to say it out loud because we were watching the other day the movie Bride of the Reanimator, and it has certain resources or certain things that are mentioned here that were also mentioned in the movie, and it's quite interesting, to be honest. It's like talking about the box, talking about that unplastered part. In this case, in the movie, it was I think it was in the laboratory.
Yep. It was this same sort of situation, but
same part.
In the film, Herbert West had opened it up, and he would replace the bricks and stuff like that. But he was storing his sort of weird experiments, and that's something they did talk about here as well. Is his fascination with animating parts and conglomerations of parts.
You know what? Because he was really afraid to open that tomb, and that's why it just mentioned just to let it there, right? Just
right. Yeah. He was too timid. Yeah.
I wonder if he actually started like using it, just like the movie.
I think that would be a stretch. And the thing is I'd like to point to a few things that are sort of dreamlike at the end. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the fact that he sees them come through the plaster wall and then they go back and the plaster is there. That wouldn't be something that is mundane. You can't just put plaster up and make it look like it's hundreds of years old, uh, or even weeks old. It would be obvious that it had just been put back up. And the other thing is, these strange looking fellows come to the door and they deliver this package, this box,
Mm-hmm.
and he accepts it. And I find that is he lets them into the room, into the house to deliver it. And that seems very dreamlike as well. It doesn't seem a, like whatever these creatures are, they're basically the undead, right? It's very unclear what they are in this initial description. They talk about them as strange looking figures. Um, but what else would be working for this undead? Like, what is this box other than related to this thing?
Yeah, but
And
why they have to burn it?
I think that the idea is that it's mysterious, and that's supposed to be frightening to us. I'm very cynical when an author doesn't actually tell you what the mystery
Mm-hmm.
is. I don't think he has an answer for it. So
Just not about the box, and that's it.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, it's a horrible box, and that's more terrifying than if I tell you what's in the box. But the idea that these creatures would show up, that he wouldn't recognize them as undead, or whatever, at that point, like what else is going to be working for this guy? And that he's going to let them into the house to deliver this box. And then at that point, Herbert West is going to come down and they're going to be so excited to burn it. Uh, and that he's going to wake up like it were all a dream, or he's gone insane or something. There's many things at the end that is just very dreamlike.
So, do you think maybe the narrator did? I mean, he maybe killed Herbert West.
I think that's meant to be an open possibility. I would guess that in Lovecraft's mind, this really did happen, but the idea that he could be guilty of that and he could just be insane. Um, I wish that he would have had a scene at the end where the narrator was being pulled back to prison in a similar way. That would have been cool. Or he's being taken to an insane asylum or something, and he's being pulled in the way that Herbert West is pulled apart and then pulled into the tomb.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I'm still debating. I mean, I do think that maybe the narrator has to do something. I mean, it has to be. He might have gone insane with all of the things that he had in his mind, and that's why he decided to kill Herbert West. But he's just like covering up with all of the insanity that Herbert West had been living throughout the years, and that's why like the whole chapter itself is a way of saying this is all of the bad things that Herbert West have been doing, and that's what I'm feeling. It's like this is the whole thing, that you have to actually hate Herbert West for the way that he has been acting. So in that like two paragraphs that you have all of the action going in, you actually don't feel remorse by watching what or by thinking about West being torn to pieces.
Well,
You're actually
especially
thinking,
after West seems to
uh-huh,
accept it. It's the finish, but let's incinerate this. I take that as him accepting his fate, and that makes it a lot more easy for me to
mhm.
accept him being pulled away. Is that he seems to know it's inevitable, and if it's inevitable, there's no use fighting it.
Yeah, and that's why I don't feel remorse by reading these lines. It's like, okay, this is your fate. You actually drag all of this to you.
Yeah, if you wanted to take it to a real extreme reading, a weird way to read this would be
Uh-huh.
like a schizophrenic or something that has just been working alongside this other doctor,
Mm-hmm.
because all of this stuff that he's talking about, no one else has seen, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is going to be like that. I mean, he's going to try to explain to everyone what's going on,
For the last
but
17 years, he's been bringing the dead back to life. That's why I had to kill him.
exactly. And it's been like, okay, it disappeared. Everything has disappeared now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're gone. And um, surprisingly, the narrator just fell unconscious.
Yeah.
And that's it. That everything is gone.
And why do these things only bother Herbert West? Do they somehow know that he's the driver in this situation? Because the narrator has been engaging in this stuff for 16, 17 years, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's another way to like put the blame on Herbert West
Yeah.
only, right? It's like, okay, he is the one that has been doing all of this, and that's why the bad guys or his monsters are coming to him, right? That's
Yeah.
why they're coming for him, because he is the one, not me.
That's
He
right.
is
Yeah.
the one. So that's how I feel, even though I know that in this case Herbert West is the victim. I don't feel remorse, but I could see that the narrator seems to be quite guilty.
Yeah, and he seems to get off scot-free. Nothing seems to
Uh-huh.
happen to him.
Uh-huh. I wonder about this human or semi-human, I don't know, it's talking about something about a beautiful head made of wax.
Yeah, so it throughout the story, it never talks about where he got that head of wax from, but that is the Sir Major Eric Clapham Lee or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That Eric Moreland Clapham Lee.
Mm-hmm.
That is the guy that he's decapitated, and he's carrying his head in a bag, and he's the leader of this army. And they sort of hint at it earlier in this chapter when they say that they talk about he used to make shuddering conjectures about the possible actions of a headless physician with the power of reanimating the dead. So there's this idea that like he's brought back a lot of people, but when he brought back this Eric Moreland Clapham Lee, he is really an evil mastermind. In the same way that what was the doctor's name? Just a second. Dr. Carl Hill. In both of the films that we've seen so far, Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator, Dr. Carl Hill has had this sort of magical power, and he's
Mm-hmm.
controlled things and things. In the Bride of the Reanimator, there's a bunch of scenes with him in the morgue. He's been brought back to life by the I thought it was a doctor, but Mace. I see him pictured here with a badge on his chest,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought he was a doctor.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, so in this film and in the earlier film, Dr. Carl Hill was sort of a mastermind, and I think in that comes from the story. In this, Eric Moreland Clapham Lee is the mastermind. It's the headless mastermind, and to hide that he's bothered that he's headless, or to hide that he's headless, he goes around with this beautiful wax head, which the way they describe it just is more creepy than just a headless thing walking around. talking about
Hmm.
his glass eyes. Oh, it sounds so creepy. It's like I just picture like a dead fish wrapped in wax.
Wow. I mean, I wonder, like, this is this is the ultimate answer to Herbert West's last question, right? He wanted to test this, and
Oh,
it was
that's
true,
right. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So everything it goes against him in this case. Even though I remember that in the last chapter we were reading that this doctor, this Eric Moreland, I think they were like friends.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
They
he
were
was.
friends. They were
They were
really
close
friends.
enough that.
Hmm.
So this Eric Clayton Lee or whatever, he was the reason why uh, Herbert West got his position in the army. So they were buddy buddy ahead of time. He did a favor for him, and Herbert West trusted him enough to actually tell him about it and teach him how to do his reanimation stuff. So they were obviously very close. And then first opportunity, he brings it back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still debating why he will be the one chosen to lead the army and kill Herbert West.
I think the idea is that he's like got the most vigorous body. He's like got a military build, and he's also really brilliant. He's a doctor. He's able to understand Herbert West's theories. So I think that for Lovecraft, that's just the most. Uh, that's the hardest opponent.
Yeah, and another thing that also just got my attention was that in the last part, the narrator was saying um, that the tomb legions were so silent by doing all of this.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't make a sound. Why would you think they didn't make a sound?
That is strange, and maybe it's kind of it makes sense when you match it together with the fact that the servants are upstairs in the attic and they're asleep. They never wake up.
Mm-hmm.
You think you think monsters come out of a tomb and tear a man apart? They'd wake up the people in the attic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but still, it's I felt when the narrator was saying that, I felt that it was trying to make it seem like it was a burial, or they were like in front of already a dead body or a dead man, so they're like paying their respects.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting angle at it. That it's sort of his proper place to be in the tomb because he's been messing around with death so much.
Yeah, so
Uh,
he needs to go back. I mean, he needs to like enter that realm. So
that's right. Yeah. Oh, well, that's interesting. I would have liked to have seen that developed a little bit more. If
yeah, I
Lovecraft
mean,
talked
it's
about,
so
yeah,
high.
sort of being somber and respectful and things like that and sad, that would be great.
Yeah, that's why they didn't mention too much, but that's how I felt, because every single monster that they have revived, it's loud,
Yep.
it's saying something. So it is strange, or there is this it's not unconscious, but it's not being said, but maybe um this last time, like, well, this doctor, this Sir Eric Moreland, had this spell on all of this, all of the horde that was coming to Herbert West, and he just decided to make it silent, just to not saying anything, so they cannot prove anything to Herbert West anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There's not a chance for him to learn anything else.
Yes, it's like, okay, we're going to be silent, but we already know that we can communicate with each other, and I can command you to do whatever I want. Which is something like, it's strange, because I think the first men, supposedly the first men that left the box, were going back to the cemetery. So I am wondering if like all of this, which I still think that it was created by the narrator's head,
Oh, okay.
and that everything is going back to normal because they're going back to their graves. They're going back to where they should be.
Yep, yep, that makes sense. Yep, just and that's why they won't bother the narrator anymore, because the narrator won't continue these experiments.
Exactly. So they're just like going back to where they started, and that's it.
And the blaster is back up.
Hmm. And that's as you said, that it's something incredible on the narrator's story to have something coming out from that, and in the morning still having that
Yeah, there not
again.
being any sign of it. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not that credible.
Yeah, that's why I described it as dreamlike. Is
Hmm.
I think in Lovecraft's mind, this really does happen in the story. That's the most chilling thing. Uh, I think that he plays with this sort of it not quite working, and maybe there's just some plot holes in the story. That's possible too.
Yeah. So another part that I wanted to like also mention, and I'm still trying to connect which one of the experiments was this. Um, okay, there was a part when on, I think it was like on the second or third paragraph. Yeah, in the third paragraph that he said that because Herbert West needed fresh corpses, he, one awful day, secured an specimen which was still alive and vigorous. So he said, like in a struggle, a needle, and a
Mhm.
powerful alkaloid. I'm thinking that it was the guy. I think it was on the third chapter that he woke up
Right,
and
exactly.
said
Yeah.
like stop, like take that needle off of me. So in this part, I think we know what happened.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I think that Lovecraft uses a needle just to
Mm-hmm.
remind us and make sure that we know that he's talking about that situation. And the alkaloid that he's talking about is you can pick your poison here. It's either probably like an opioid, or it is. They had this tubicurine, which was this blow dart poison. And the way that it works, it's an alkaloid as well, and it was being
Mm-hmm.
used in medicine at the time. And it actually it became involved in anesthesiology,
Mm-hmm.
where now they give drugs to relax the muscles. So this is a roundabout way of saying that this tubicurine it relaxes the muscles, but you're still
Mm-hmm.
conscious and everything. And
Okay.
so you get to decide as the reader, does he mean an opioid, which is just gonna like put him to sleep and give him great opium dreams, or does he mean this tubicurine, which means that he was awake for those weeks and just being left alive and just paralyzed? So he's totally conscious for this whole time, but he can't move his muscles because he keeps on getting this tubicurine in him.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and what I liked about this part is that the narrator is telling you finally what happened with that guy, with that man. He was killed. He was,
Yeah, it's more clear. Yeah,
yeah, and this was a succeeded experiment. He succeeded
yeah,
with. So let's say that we finished that part and we didn't know what happened to this person, but in the end, it was a succeed.
yeah,
That's what, that's how Herbert West planned, and that's how it ended.
yeah. Yep, definitely.
Hmm.
And that's the thing is I just really like the rehash methodology here with the where he gives you that quick summary. I know that Lovecraft hated doing it, but I think it adds a lot to the story format. It's almost it almost develops a rhythm for you. And if you did miss anything or he was a little bit vague about anything before, it's nice to see it cleared up.
Yeah, you can catch up with this.
Yeah,
But still, as I said, I think he used it. He used it twice here. Like he used like for two reasons, and it was like a really good approach, just to make it look like the narrator is completely disconnected from Herbert West, and it's like I was West's closest friend and only confidential assistant. So I'm guessing that this has been told after Herbert West's death.
that's right. Yeah,
So um he's like he's watching it from afar. And I'm like, I was involved with him, but I didn't shared his views, right? I'm not guilty,
yeah.
right? Um,
People didn't notice anything weird about him, but they noticed I was afraid of him.
exactly. It's like, no, no, no. I am the victim of in everything. Like, okay, let me check. What else? What else? Well, let's say that I am. I mean, if I want to, if I have to say something about the movie, I mean, comparing to this last chapter, I am glad that we watch it. And I haven't read it. I mean, I haven't read the sixth chapter before.
Oh, when I
But
saw the yeah, when I saw the side of the tomb, I almost
uh,
burst. I was like, "It's the tomb! It's the tomb!"
yeah, yeah. Now that I can like relate it to that, it's like, oh my god. I mean, they were using that as well, which is great.
Yeah, I thought this was one of the coolest environments that I had seen set up. This ancient tomb, and rather than opening it, you just leave it there. So you just say it, and you say, I was really excited about seeing what was in it, but we were too afraid to open it, and it feels like an Egyptian tomb or something like that. Like, what would you find in there? It's a secret tomb in 1768. So it was
Mm.
such a great setup to have the lab right next to that.
Yeah, but I wonder what the director of this movie was thinking about when he decided to make Herbert West to take those like bricks out of that part and start like saving all of the
Well,
failed experiments there.
there was some really powerful imagery in the film, but it wasn't dreamlike. Like there was some shots that would be like a dream. Like for instance, her screaming, the bride, the resurrected bride, her screaming,
Hmm.
"What do you want from me?" and her tearing out her heart and offering it to him. Like that's almost dreamlike. But everything was something that could happen in a science fiction horror story, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it and all the characters' actions were reasonably believable. You would expect them in a real world. Whereas in this short story, I really do point out that it's more dreamlike, or you take it to be evidence that the narrator is lying. Um, but these things that don't line up, like the plaster that we talked about.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. What else?
I like that the sort of rhyming in that one line. The carnivorous thing that gnawed and pawed at Sefton bars.
Well, we have lots of that around the story. Hmm.
For me,
Mm-hmm.
getting things in the mail is always such a joy. I love ordering things in the mail. It's like Christmas for me. Uh, and yet, here it's just turned totally on its head, where it's like an inversion of Christmas, where there's this horrible gift that you didn't want, that's free, and you don't know what's in it, and you don't even want to unwrap it. You just want to get rid of it before you even see. Like, what could it have been that it was so horrible that you wouldn't even want to see it?
But well, let's remember that in the movie there was the head there.
Oh, did they deliver the head? I forgot.
Yeah, in the movie there was the head of the doctor.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think that's the case here because it doesn't even make any sound when they burn it.
Well, it was the same thing when when they got Herbert West, so there wasn't like any sound. I think it was all plotted.
Yeah, maybe the head was in the box because and maybe they're taking the head as a replacement. They're gonna have Herbert West head instead of like the wax head or something. Because yeah, when they come through the tomb wall, there's no description of the head or it talking anywhere.
Well, that's a different plot as well. Maybe they just wanted like to take all of the ideas of Herbert West and this new abomination that he did. I mean, this last one that he wanted to, I don't know, to test and succeeded on Herbert West's mind. Now is searching for him and his ideas just to take it and to be able to continue the experiments in the
Yeah,
afterlife, I guess.
yeah. In the film here, they talk about things that are semi-human or fractionally human,
Mm-hmm.
and in the film they have certain really cool setups, like they have bat wings sewn onto the head, so that you've
Yeah.
got like this sort of combination of an animal and a human, or a combination of the pieces. And so something else that would have been cool is if in the tomb we got to see that there was this sort of undead thing that was a conglomeration. So we usually think of like a body with pieces, right? But this
Mm-hmm.
is going against that. So you could imagine like a bunch of pieces of bodies that were like one sort of horde of a thing. Like maybe it would even have multiple heads. But like since the different parts can be alive separately, and you could maybe like swap a head for another head, maybe you could have more than just like two arms and two legs and a trunk, you know?
Yeah, but that's like a further studies, like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going
exactly.
further. Exactly.
It would be interesting though. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that will be like a different plot, and I never thought of it like that way. I mean, in that manner.
He's definitely sure he didn't kill the guy. At least according to him, he knows West was gone, and he knows he didn't do it. But if they say he's a madman or a murderer, and he admits that probably he's mad, but he's not admitting he's a murderer.
Hmm. As I said, strange.
Yeah, no, yeah. If your theory is correct, then of course he wouldn't admit that he was a murderer. But just pointing out that he's not just insane and babbling about everything. One thing he's certain about is that he was not the one who killed Herbert West, and he did not burn Herbert West's body.
Well, you can also claim to be mad and kill someone and just still claiming to be mad. I mean,
Yeah,
to be crazy,
yeah,
and that's it. I was crazy. I don't remember. I don't think I was a murderer, but he still do it.
right.
I still did it.
Well, I was definitely not disappointed. I thought that this was a great finish for this 6 parts. It's really quite amazing to think that he only made $5 for each part.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually expecting for a bad ending, but this wasn't disappointing. I mean, I wasn't disappointed by reading
Yeah,
all of this, to be honest.
I wonder if he could have had more success if he had continued these stories. Like, uh, if instead of having 6 parts, he had like 40 parts, something that he released a couple times a year or something.
But you will have to have a lot of story to tell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you know about his letter writing?
No.
So Lovecraft, when he was alive, he did a ton of letter writing. In fact, this was really common before the internet, where a lot of writers, especially as they're developing, would have sort of pen pals with other people that like their work or fellow writers and things. And Lovecraft apparently is somebody that wrote almost more than anyone else in history in terms of letters. Uh, I think Voltaire had written more than him, but there's just something like 10,000 letters that they have from Lovecraft that he would write back and forth with people. And, just like people that spend time chatting online or something, that they would probably get more done and have more work if they had spent less time doing that. I think that's true of Lovecraft as well, that he really enjoyed writing back and forth and helping other writers with their work, but it sort of cut into the amount of work that he produced.
I wonder if he was still like writing different stories with these pen pals, like developing different stories, like small stories, like being like working while that he was like writing these letters.
Yeah, I think that until he was very sick, that he was writing fairly often. So this would have been near the beginning of his career, but I would have imagined that it'd probably be normal for him to write 3 or 4 things that would probably get published at some point. But um, because he had a career of what, 10 or 15 years, and we saw something like 30 things that he had published, something around there. Uh, and so he was getting stuff published in those little rags, and he even did some short stories, I think, that were a little bit longer, a little bit more like a novella. Uh, I think the most he ever got paid for a story was something like $240, which would have been for him a very good month. Maybe a month and a half, not quite 2 months worth of all of his. Like he would pay $40 a month for the place he was staying in after
Yeah,
his wife basically left him. Yeah.
I wonder. I mean, he really have a really like good story, and I am not disappointed by the movies, but I
Oh yeah.
think they can do so much more in the
They
movies.
yeah, I think that they were aimed for a particular crowd. Like there was a lot of sexual tension and a lot of nudity and a lot of gore effects and things like that. And so I almost feel like this was these movies were made for almost teenage boys or something. They weren't meant to be these great artistic works or anything, you know?
But I still think that the principal, I mean the actors there were really good, especially Herbert
Oh yeah,
West.
yeah,
He
yeah.
really personified Herbert West. I think he actually read the whole story.
Oh yeah, I bet you a lot of them did. Yeah, yeah. He was such a great actor. I would like to see him in some other roles just to see if, because some actors are just that sort of a role, and some of them just fit. Like they can just be sort of like chameleons. Uh, an example would be the first time I ever saw Jeremy Brenner in a film. He was playing Jeffrey Dahmer. Do you know who Jeffrey Dahmer is?
No.
No. He was a serial killer in like the 80s.
Oh,
And
okay.
Jeremy Brenner Do you know Hawkeye from the Avengers?
Yeah.
So he's a famous actor. He's in a lot of things, but this was the first thing I'd ever seen him in. And when I saw him playing Jeffrey Dahmer, I was like, "Oh, this guy is so creepy. Where did they find this guy? He's perfect to play a weirdo like Jeffrey Dahmer." And I just thought that that was the way that the guy really was. You know, he had sort of a weird lisp, and just the way that he would look at things was very creepy. Uh, he had sort of greasy hair and stuff.
Hmm.
And then later on, I saw him in a different role. I saw him in The Town or something like that, where he was completely different. And I was like, oh, Jeremy Prater is not just a weirdo; he's a really good actor. And that's what I would like to see about this actor that played Herbert West. To see him in a different role, to see if he's just this weirdo nerd character in real life, or if he's just a really good actor and he could be something else.
Yeah, but I'm still like debating. I mean, we should definitely see the last movie
Like, well,
just to compare it, and I think we should do also live stream to compare the three movies with the whole. I mean, with the six chapters.
okay, you want to
Try,
have a
yeah,
live stream to wrap this up next week?
I think just to like make it like short and quick, but like directly to the point, because we are just comparing the short stories, right, or the short story itself with the six chapters, and we're just like mentioning certain things about the movies, which I have liked both of them at the moment, and they have already I mean, they already um have some of the resources that this short story has. But I really want to compare it, like overall, this trilogy of movies compared to the short story. If it's really what we were expecting in the movies or
Yeah,
not.
I have no idea where they're going to go with this third film because it came out years later again, right?
Yeah, but it still have like the same actor, like the principal one.
Yeah, and I think the
So
same director, I think, as well.
I
Yeah.
think so. So you can see that it's Herbert West, but it's a little bit older. And I think they have tried to make it look like he haven't like he's still the same young Herbert West.
Oh, okay. It's not
Yeah,
17 years later or something.
no, it is, obviously it is, but
Oh, okay.
you can tell that he's growing old, but I think they're trying to make it look like he's not old, so he's trying to like what I have seen, like only the image when I saw the trailer of that movie.
Right, but I'm just wondering if they would set the last film like 17 years after the first one or something.
No, no, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know. I didn't like I didn't want to get into the movie or into the trailer. I just wanted to like watch the images just to see how Herbert West was,
sure.
because
Yeah.
I wanted to relate to what the narrator said in one of the chapters when he was saying, okay, I'm looking at Herbert West, but he doesn't seem to grow old,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
right?
That is specifically mentioned. Yeah.
So I think that's why well, as I said, I am looking at this Herbert West in this new movie that we haven't watched, and he seemed to be like the same, like um brown hair, and like just it has the normal factions if it haven't grown old.
Yeah, I think that this second film was only supposed to be a couple years later. I
Hmm.
think they had graduated from medical school, and that was just a few years after the first one. You know what was weird was that they never really filled out. They had that famous actress in the first one, and at
Hmm.
the end of the film, they bring her back to life with the reanimator juice, and we hear her scream. And that was just sort of commented on, like explained off screen in this second film.
Hmm.
That they didn't show us what happened to her or anything like that, and they weren't really clear about what happened to her after they reanimated her, or if they had actually reanimated her, or the story had sort of changed between films.
Yeah, and another part is that they haven't explained if they are well, if Herbert West already like injected this potion or this um what they have to make this corpse to be reanimated, how could they got the heart if the heart is still having this venom or potion in it,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
right? I mean, they took the heart before they did the reanimation, because they have it on the second movie. So they said they're
right.
going to use that.
Yeah, that's Meg's heart. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't remember. I should like watch the movie again. But there is a part when Herbert West, it's like showing it to this Kane, I mean to this Dr. Kane, and it's like, this is the heart of Meg, I think the name was. And I don't know if it's,
Yeah,
if it
they
looks like if it's like beating.
yeah,
I don't
I
remember
don't
that.
remember it still being active or anything. Yeah,
Hmm.
and he keeps on trying to entice him to be part of the experiment because he says that it will beat again and it will have life again. So I don't think it does. And the end of the first film, they didn't take the heart out because he's trying to bring her back to life, and then he uses the reanimator juice on her.
Yeah,
Um, so he's just trying to do the CPR, which sort of loops that film from the very beginning where he's trying to bring back a patient, but they're dead. And he's trying to use CPR on it's a woman there.
yeah,
And so the beginning and the end of the film both begin with, or both have that one doctor who's ostensibly the character that fills in for the narrator in the films, and he's giving somebody CPR, and the CPR doesn't work, and at the end of the film, he gives the girlfriend the reanimator juice, and she screams, and we get the black. So she had her heart at that point.
yeah. It might have been it, but it's still like, I don't know. It's not quite sure.
Yeah, I think they were just a little bit loose with it, and I think
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah, it's
Especially,
not important, but I was just like questioning what could
yeah,
that.
and movies used to be a little bit different. Nowadays, people have a tendency to watch movies in a row
Mm-hmm.
and to really be quite familiar with exactly what happened in the previous film. Whereas, especially decades and decades ago, people would go to see films in the theater just because it was exciting to go and see a film in the theater. And they wouldn't have necessarily seen the other ones. They wouldn't have a copy at home all the time to be watching again and again. It wasn't until I would say the late '80s or the '90s that they started playing them on cable a lot of times, having reruns of movies. So uh, it was less important that all the details fit exactly because they weren't just telling one story. Each movie, I think, in decades past, stood on its own a little bit more than they do now.
Well, if we go into that part, specifically that part about the movies, I think they are already like trying to get us involved into this, movie frenzy. Instead of just having like random movies, they're trying to like having sequels to be able for us to like being connected and to go back to a movie theater, but not exactly to enjoy going to a movie theater, but to actually go and watch the movie because we really want to follow the sequel. And
Right, right.
we just need that information. It's like we needed that. That's part of what we came for, like when we are going to a movie theater.
Yeah, you know what's funny is there's some films that I've wanted to go and see because I've been worried about them being spoiled for me. So something like Star Wars or something, I could wait to watch that film, but I want to see it earlier because I don't want to hear online something that they reveal in the film. I want it to be new for me. And so it's funny how there's that pressure where I'm not really excited to go and see the film, but I got to go see have to go see the film if I can afford it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do have certain people that are also talking about movies like around me, and that's why I just tend to like block them or like keep them like far away if I want to like watch the movie. But
Right.
it's been quite difficult for me to watch like a good movie nowadays. But I definitely, if I want to watch a movie, I have to like get disconnected from everyone or trying to watch it first.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
hate it when it's like a channel that I watch regularly or something, and they begin an episode or a video with a spoiler.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, okay, we're going to watch the film, but remember the actor dies. Just that. Just that. Just to let you know, the actor dies. Oh my god. Yeah, that spoils everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have anything else to mention about the that this last chapter.
Well, I guess we're going to be doing a wrap up episode, but I just wanted to say thank you to anyone that's followed us this long. You've really listened to a lot of content here, and remember to subscribe if you like this sort of content, and thank you for sticking with us.
And also, I think I haven't done this. And I think I'm going to start doing it, Nicholas. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to like say it publicly. I'm just so sorry. I haven't even mentioned your YouTube channel. Nicholas here has also a YouTube channel, which is perfect for people that wants to listen to audiobooks, and he's going to start getting new content, I'm sure of it.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
He's a lovely perfect writer, and he is also a perfect reader, so please go to his YouTube channel. It's Nicholas Cato Strode, so you can go there, check it out, listen to all of the audiobooks, and I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, and even if the stuff on there is a little bit low quality for you now, look forward because it's going to get a lot better very soon.
And we're actually looking forward for that. Definitely. So I think that will be it for this time. We have finished the chapters from this short story, which is H.P. Lovecraft, Herbert West, Reanimator. As I said, I think we can wrap up like around the same time next week to be able to talk about the different movies that are around from this short story, which are Herbert West Reanimator, The Bride of the Reanimator, and Beyond Reanimator, which are the movies, compared to the 6 chapters that we have read already, which had the same name, which is Herbert West Reanimator. So, if there is anything that you want to add, Nicholas?
I think that's everything.
Okay. So thank you so much. If you have stayed until this time, just listening to the live stream, we are still going to check out which will be the next story to read. So I thank everyone that it's been around that we're going to be watching the live stream. So I'll talk to you guys soon.